The following transmission is a work of fiction. This is now tuned the Dead broadcast.
My name is Daniel Reyes. I am a senior data auditor for the National Vital Statistics Coordination Office. And I'm recording this because in about 4 hours, the morning briefing is going to ask me what happened. And I want a record that exists before anyone tells me what I saw. It is 12:47 a.m. Eastern. I am in the third floor operations room of our regional hub outside Baltimore. There are 11 of us on the overnight rotation. The lights are the usual dim white. The coffee is the usual burnt. Through the window behind me, the parking lot is half empty and the rain is doing that slow, undecided thing where it cannot commit to falling. I want you to understand what this job is, because it matters. Every county morgue, every hospital, every coroner, every funeral home in this country uploads cause of death data into a shared federal pipeline. We do not investigate. We do not judge. We aggregate. We clean. We pass it up the chain. By morning, the CDC has a tidy national picture of who died yesterday and what killed them. It is, honestly, one of the most boring jobs in public health. At 12 a.m., the feed stopped. Not crashed, not throttled. Stopped. As in, every county in every state simultaneously ceased reporting deaths. We see outages, we see lag. We see one state having a bad night because some intern unplugged a switch. We have never, in the 11 years I've been doing this, seen all 50 states go silent in the same second. My supervisor, Karen, came over at 12:11 and stood behind my chair and said, very quietly, "Daniel, is your screen frozen?" And I said no. And she said, "Mine isn't either." That was 36 minutes ago. I am recording because the phones have started ringing, and the calls are not what I expected. I expected angry IIT people. I expected confused county clerks. I am not getting either of those. I'm going to walk you through what is happening as it happens. If something interrupts me, you will hear it. The first call I picked up was from a woman named Patricia in Lexington County, South Carolina. She is a records clerk. I have spoken to her maybe 20 times over the years. Pleasant voice, smoker's cough. Talks about her grandson. She did not say hello. She said, "Daniel, I can't file them." I asked her what she meant. She said the system was rejecting every death certificate she tried to submit, not bouncing them back with errors, accepting them, processing them, and then returning them as blank. Name fields wiped. Date of death wiped. Cause wiped. Like the form had been swallowed and spat back out clean. I told her it sounded like a sync issue on our end. I told her to hold the certificates locally and resubmit at 6. She said, "Daniel, that's not the part I'm calling about." She told me she had 8 certificates on her desk, 8 people who died in Lexington County between 11 and midnight. Car accident, 2 hospice patients, a heart attack, a stillbirth, an overdose, a hit and run, and 1 undetermined. She said when she went to enter the names into the system, she could not remember them. She was holding the paperwork in her hand. The names were printed right there. She could read them. She could read them out loud. But the second she looked away from the page, the names slid out of her head. She said it was like trying to hold water in a fist. She asked me if that was a known glitch. I told her no. I told her to take a breath. I told her to read me one of the names. She said, "Robert," and then stopped. She said it again. "Robert." And then a long pause, and then she laughed, the way people laugh when they are about to cry. She said, "Daniel, I'm looking right at it. I can see the letters. I just can't say the rest." I asked her if anyone else in her office was experiencing this. She said, "There's no one else here. It's the overnight. It's just me." Then her line went quiet. not disconnected. Quiet. I could hear her breathing. I could hear her HVAC. I could hear a chair creak. She said very softly, "Daniel, I think I need to leave the building." And she hung up. That was call 1. By the time I set the receiver down, 3 more lines were lit. I want to be careful here, because the temptation is to make this sound bigger than it is. So I'm going to give you only what I have confirmed, in the order I confirmed it. Between 12:18 and 12:43, I personally spoke to 11 county-level reporters in 9 states. Every one of them described the same 3 things, in roughly the same order. 1. The system accepted their death certificates and returned them blank. 2. They could not retain the names of the deceased in short-term memory, even while looking at the documents. 3. And this is the one that is making the back of my neck feel cold. Every single one of them said the room they were sitting in had become quieter than it should be. Not silent, quieter. They described it the same way. One woman in Nebraska said it sounded like the building was holding its breath. A man in Oregon said the hum of his refrigerator had dropped a half step. A clerk in Maine said her tinnitus stopped, and she has had tinnitus for 19 years. I asked each of them if they were alone. 9 of the 11 were. The other 2 were with one co-worker each, and in both cases, the co-worker had already left to check something and not come back. Karen is standing at the front of the room now on a call with someone at CDC. I can hear her saying the same sentence 3 different ways. No, the feed isn't down. The feed is open. There's just nothing in it. The senior tech, Marcus, is at his workstation with his headphones off, which he never does. He is staring at his monitor like it owes him money. I just asked him what he's looking at. He said, "Daniel, pull up the national dashboard." I did. There is a running tally on the national dashboard. Deaths reported in the last 24 hours. It updates every 90 seconds. At 11:59 p.m., it read 7. At 12 a.m., it read 0. It has read 0 ever since. Karen got off the call at 1:02 a.m. She walked back to her desk without saying anything to anyone, sat down, and put her hands flat on the desk like she was checking that it was still there. I waited about a minute. Then I went over. I asked her what CDC said. She did not look up. She said, "They're seeing it too. They're seeing it everywhere." I asked her what that meant. She said, "It means no one in the United States has officially died since midnight. Not on paper, not in any database, not in any hospital intake system. The morgues are calling. The hospitals are calling. People are dying, Daniel. The deaths are happening. They just aren't being recorded." I asked her if it was a cyber attack. She said, "If it is, it's the strangest one I've ever heard of. Because the system is working. The submissions are going through. They're just coming out empty. It's not the network. It's the information itself. The data is arriving, and then it's..." She paused. She lifted one hand off the desk and held it palm up, like she was weighing something invisible. "It's evaporating." I said the word, evaporating, felt dramatic. She looked at me then. Karen has been doing this job for 26 years. She is the most unflappable person I have ever worked with. She once kept eating a sandwich through a tornado warning. She said, "Daniel, I just got off the phone with a coroner in Phoenix who told me he has a body on his table and he cannot remember whether it is male or female. He's looking at it. He cannot tell. He says his eyes keep sliding off." I did not know what to say to that. She said, "Go back to your station. Take the calls. Write everything down. Pen and paper. Don't trust the system right now. I went back to my desk. I am writing this down. At 1:14 a.m., the hospital pages started. We have a side channel for high-priority hospital communications. Usually it is used for mass casualty events, disease outbreaks, anything where vital statistics need to know fast. The first page came from Mount Sinai in New York. A single line. Need guidance. Death certs not generating. 3 pending. Then Mass General. Same issue. 4 pending. Then Cleveland Clinic. Same. 7. Then Cedars-Sinai. Then Houston Methodist. Then Mayo. Then a hospital in Boise I have never heard of. Then a hospice in rural Vermont. The pages were coming in faster than I could read them. The numbers were climbing. 3, 4, 7, 11, 16, 22. By 1:30 a.m., there were over 400 unresolved deaths in the queue nationally, and not a single one of them had a name attached. The names were being typed. The names existed. The patients had charts, ID bracelets, family members in the waiting rooms. The names just would not stick to the records. A nurse in Atlanta sent a message through the page channel that I am going to read out loud because I want it preserved. She wrote, "We have a patient who passed at 12:51. His wife is in the room with him. She has been holding his hand for 2 hours. I just asked her his name, and she started crying because she said she can hear herself saying it, but she cannot hear what she is saying." I read that message 3 times. Then I stood up, walked to the break room, and threw up in the sink. I am back at my desk now. We are continuing. At 1:48 a.m., my personal cell phone rang. We are not supposed to have them out on shift. I had it out anyway. It was my sister, Mara. Mara lives in Pittsburgh. She is a labor and delivery nurse at Allegheny General. She works nights, like me. We have a standing agreement that if either of us calls the other between midnight and 6, it is an emergency. I answered on the first ring. I said her name. She said, "Danny, are you seeing this?" I told her I was at work. I told her I was seeing something. I asked her what she was seeing. She said, "We lost a baby tonight." I did not say anything. There is nothing you can say to that sentence. She said, 26 weeks. The mom is she's okay. Physically. We tried for an hour. I was there. I was in the room. I held her. I held the baby. She stopped. I could hear her walking. I could hear a door close. I could hear the change in acoustics when she stepped into a stairwell. She said, "Danny, I cannot remember the baby's name." The mom named her. The mom said her name out loud. To her, before. I heard it. I heard her say it. I was 3 feet away. I asked her if she could remember any part of it. A sound. A letter. She said, "I remember that it was beautiful. I remember thinking it was beautiful. That's all I have." I told her what I was seeing on my end. I told her about the blank certificates, the dashboard, the 11 counties, the coroner in Phoenix. I told her it was happening everywhere. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Danny, there's something else." She said the mom, after, had asked to hold her daughter. Standard. They do that. They let the families have time. Mara had wrapped the baby in a blanket and brought her over. And the mom had taken her and looked at her, and then looked up at Mara with an expression Mara said she did not have a word for. The mom had said, "Where is she?" Mara said, "She's right here, honey. She's right here in your arms." The mom said, "I can feel her. I can feel her weight. I can't see her." Mara said, "I looked down. Danny, I looked down at the blanket." And Sadhu could see the shape. I could see the blanket folded around something. I could see my own hands holding her. but I couldn't see her. I asked Mara if she was okay. She said, "I have to go back in. I have 8 more patients. I just needed to tell someone. I needed to tell someone who would believe me." I told her I believed her. She said, "Don't go home tonight, Danny. Stay where there are people. Stay where there are lights." She hung up. When I came back to my station, Marcus was on his feet. Marcus does not stand. Marcus is one of those engineers who treats his chair like a saddle. In 4 years of working with him, I have seen him stand exactly twice, both times to leave for the day. He was standing now, headphones around his neck, staring at the wall behind his monitor like there was a window there. There is no window there. The wall is concrete. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "Daniel, come look at this." I went over. He had pulled up the raw packet log from the federal pipeline. It is the unprocessed stream of data coming in from every reporting source in the country. Normally, it is a wall of structured text, scrolling too fast to read, full of names and codes and timestamps. It was still scrolling. The packets were still coming in. The timestamps were live. The name fields were full, but every name on the screen was the same name. I'm going to spell it out because I want this preserved. D-O-E Doe, John Doe, Jane Doe, Infant Doe, 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 thousands of them, tens of thousands. The packets were coming in from every county in every state, and every single deceased person being reported was named Doe. I asked Marcus how long it had been doing this. He said, "I don't know, I just noticed." I asked him what the original names were being replaced with on submission. He said, "I don't think they're being replaced. I think this is what the system is receiving." I asked him what he meant. He said, "The reporters at the other end are typing real names. I've watched the keystroke logs. They're typing Mary Anderson. They're typing James Whitfield. They're typing Aaliyah Carter. And by the time the packet arrives here, the name field says Doe." He sat down. He put his head in his hands. He said, "Daniel, the names are dying before the packets get here." I told him to keep watching. I told him I was going to call my mother. He nodded without looking up. My mother lives in Falls Church, Virginia. She is 73. She has a small dog named Pepper and a landline she refuses to give up. I called the landline first. It rang 12 times. No answering machine, because she never figured out how to set one up after my father died. I called her cell. Voicemail. The voicemail greeting was her voice, and hearing it made me realize I had not actually heard her voice in 9 days. And I felt something cold move down through my chest and into my stomach. I left a message. I tried to sound calm. I told her I loved her. I told her to call me back when she woke up. I told her to keep the porch light on. I hung up. I sat there for a minute. Then I called my neighbor, the one across the hall from her apartment, an older man named Hank who has a key to her place for emergencies. Hank picked up on the second ring. He sounded asleep. I asked him to walk across the hall and knock on her door. I told him I knew it was late. I told him I would owe him. He grumbled. He said, "Daniel, your mother's fine. She was watering her plants at 10. I saw her in the hallway." I told him that was not the question. I asked him to please go knock. He sighed. He said, "Hold on." I heard him put the phone down. I heard a door open. I heard slippers on carpet. I heard knuckles on wood. I heard him say, "Linda? Linda, honey, it's Hank. Your son's on the phone." There was a long silence. Then he said, "Daniel." His voice had changed. I said yes. He said, "Daniel, the door's open." I told Hank to go inside. I told him to stay on the phone with me. I heard him breathing as he stepped in. I heard the soft creak of my mother's hallway floor. I have not lived in that apartment since I was 22, but I know exactly which board makes that sound. Third from the door, left side. He said, "Linda, it's Hank. Your son's on the phone, sweetheart." He said, "The TV is on." I asked him what was on the TV. He said, "Nothing, just a blue screen, like the signal cut." He kept walking. He went into the living room. He said her chair was empty. He said her glasses were on the side table and her book was open face down on the arm of the couch. He said, "Pepper." I heard him call the dog twice. He said, "The dog's in the kitchen. The dog Izukai. The dog is sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, just sitting." I asked him to check the bedroom. He went down the hall. I heard the bedroom door open. I heard him say her name again, softer. He said, "Daniel, she's in bed." I said, "Okay." I said, "Is she sleeping?" He was quiet. He said, "Daniel, I don't know how to say this." I told him to just say it. He said, "I can see the shape of her under the covers. I can see her hair on the pillow. The light is on. I can see her glasses on the nightstand. I can see her hand on top of the blanket." He said, "But when I try to look at her face, my eyes, they keep going to the wall behind her." I felt my throat close. I said, Hank, listen to me. Is she breathing?" He said, "I can't tell. I can see the blanket moving. I think it's moving. But I can't, Daniel. I cannot make myself look at her face. I am trying. I'm standing 2 feet away, and I'm trying." I told him to take her hand. He said, Okay. I'm reaching down." There was a long silence. He said very quietly, "Her hand is cold." I did not say anything. He said, "Daniel, I am so sorry. I am so sorry, son." I said, Hank, listen. I need you to remember her name. I need you to say her name, right now, out loud." He tried. He could not. I do not remember the next hour very well. I remember Karen coming over and putting a hand on my shoulder and not saying anything, which is how I knew she had been listening. I remember someone bringing me water. I remember Marcus, at one point, standing up at his workstation and saying loud to the whole room, "It's accelerating. It is accelerating. We are at 14,000 unreported deaths, and we have been live for 2 hours." I remember the lights flickering once, just once, long enough that everyone looked up. I remember thinking very clearly that I had spoken to my mother on Tuesday and she had told me about a recipe she was trying, a chicken thing with lemons, and I had only half listened. And now I would never be able to remember whether she had said rosemary or thyme. And the not knowing of that one stupid herb felt, in that moment, like the entire shape of the loss. I remember Karen sitting down next to me and saying, "Daniel, you can go home." And I remember saying, "There's nothing at home." And she said, "Then stay." So I stayed. I picked up the phone. I started taking calls again. Because if I was going to lose my mother to whatever this was, I was going to lose her while doing the only thing I knew how to do, which is sit at a desk and try to write down what was real. At 3:11 a.m., the press embargo broke. I do not know which agency leaked it. There is going to be an investigation, probably, if there is anyone left to investigate. But at 3:11, a reporter at the Washington Post published a piece online titled, "Federal Death Reporting System has recorded 0 fatalities since midnight. Sources inside CD. See describe cascading anomaly." Within 9 minutes, the piece had been picked up by every major outlet. Within 20, it was the lead on 3 cable networks. Within 30, the hashtag was trending in every English-speaking country. The phones in our operations room, which had been ringing steadily, started ringing differently. Not faster, not louder, differently. The pattern of calls shifted. We stopped getting county reporters and started getting press, and family members and politicians. And finally, around 3:40, the calls that scared me most. Ordinary people who had just lost someone and could not say their name. I am going to share 3 of those calls. I am keeping them anonymous. I am sharing them because the world should hear what this sounded like. The first was a man in Sacramento. His wife had died of pancreatic cancer at 1:20 a.m. He was sitting next to her body. He said, "I have been married to her for 41 years. I know her name. I have written her name on Christmas cards and tax returns and the inside of the cabinet door where we keep the medication list. I just walked into the kitchen and looked at the cabinet door. The handwriting is mine. I cannot read what it says." The second was a teenage girl. She had called the public hotline because she did not know where else to call. Her grandmother had died in the next room, about 40 minutes earlier. She said, "I am scared to go back in. I know she's in there. I can hear the clock. But every time I think about her face, I see the wallpaper behind her instead. Is that going to stay like this? Is that permanent?" I did not know the answer. I told her it was okay to wait for daylight. I told her to call someone who could come sit with her. She said there was no one. She said her mother was at work. She said her mother worked at a hospital. I told her her mother would come home. I did not know if that was true. The third call I am not going to share. I just want to note that it existed. The president addressed the country at 4 a.m. Eastern. It was not a formal address. There was no podium, no flag, no teleprompter. It was a phone-quality audio statement, pushed out through every emergency notification system in the country at the same time. My phone buzzed. Karen's phone buzzed. Marcus's phone buzzed. The phones of every person in every office and every home and every car in America buzzed in the same second. The voice was calm, tired, older than I remembered. He said, "My fellow Americans, at approximately midnight Eastern Standard Time, the federal death reporting system experienced an unprecedented disruption. I want to be honest with you. We do not yet understand the nature of this disruption. What we can confirm is the following." He paused. "People are still dying. We do not want anyone to believe otherwise. Hospitals are still operating. Emergency services are still responding. The disruption appears to affect only the recording, identification, and remembrance of the deceased. We are working with the world's leading experts to determine the cause." Another pause, longer. "We are asking the public to take 3 steps. First, if a loved one has passed in the last 4 hours, write their name down. Write it on paper. Write it more than once. Keep the paper somewhere safe. Photograph the paper. Do not rely on memory. Second, do not be alone tonight if you can avoid it. Go to a family member. Go to a neighbor. Open your door to people who knock. Be patient with each other. Third." There was a silence that lasted, I would estimate, 11 seconds. On a national broadcast, 11 seconds is an eternity, long enough that I thought the feed had cut. Then he said, "If you are listening to this, and you have already forgotten someone tonight, I want you to know that we hear you. We hear you. And we are going to find a way to bring them back into the record. I promise you that." The broadcast ended. Karen, sitting next to me, said very quietly, "He couldn't do it." I asked her what she meant. She said, "He couldn't promise we'd find a way to bring them back. He could only promise the record." I went to the window around 4:20 a.m. Our operations room is on the 3rd floor. The window looks out over a parking lot, a service road, and beyond that, a stretch of low commercial buildings and the edge of a residential neighborhood. On a normal night at 4:20, you can see maybe 2 or 3 lit windows in the houses across the way. Tonight, every window was lit. Every single one. I stood there for a long time, looking at them. I tried to count. I gave up around 70. The lights were not flickering. They were not signaling. They were just on. People had turned on their lights and were sitting awake in them. And you could feel it through the glass, the collective held breath of a country that had been told to write down the names of the people it loved before it lost the ability to. A car went by on the service road, slowly. It was not going anywhere. It just drove past, taillights red, and turned around at the far end of the lot and drove back the way it came. Like the driver did not know what else to do with himself. A second car pulled into the lot and parked. Nobody got out. The headlights stayed on for a minute, then dimmed, then went off. The car just sat there. Karen came up beside me. She looked out for a while without speaking. Then she said, "Daniel, I want to tell you something, and I do not want you to react." I said, "Okay." She said, "I cannot remember what my father looked like. I have been trying for an hour. I know he had a mustache. I know he wore a brown coat. I know I loved him. I cannot put his face together. He died in 2009. I did not say anything. She said, "It is not just the new dead." She walked back to her desk. I kept looking at the windows. After Karen said what she said, I did something I should not have done on shift. I opened my personal cloud drive on my work computer. I went into the folder labeled Family. I scrolled back to the oldest photos, the ones from my childhood, the ones my mother had scanned in for me 5 years ago when she was getting rid of the old albums. There is a photograph from 1994. I am 6. My father is sitting on the back porch of our house in Falls Church, holding me on his lap. He died in 2017. I looked at the photograph. I could see myself. I could see the porch. I could see the shape of an adult man in a denim shirt with his arm around my shoulders. I could not see his face. The photograph was clear. The resolution was fine. The other faces in other photographs were fine. My mother, in a photo from the same year, was perfectly visible. But where my father's face should have been, my eyes simply moved past it, slid off, the way Hank had described 2 hours earlier, trying to look at my mother in her bed. I clicked through to another photo, my father at my high school graduation. Same thing. Another, my father at my wedding. Same. I closed the folder. I sat very still. I thought, this is what Karen meant. It is not just the new dead. It is reaching backward. I thought, how far back? I thought, how fast? I did not say any of this out loud. I did not want to be the one who said it. Marcus said it instead. He stood up at his workstation around 4:40 a.m. and he said to the whole room, "Guys, it's going backwards. The dashboard is rewriting the historical record." I went to Marcus's station. So did Karen. So did 3 other people on shift. He had the National Mortality Dashboard open in one window and the Historical Archive in another. The Historical Archive goes back to 1900. It contains every recorded death in the United States. Names, dates, causes, locations. It is a monument. It is, in some real way, the country's memory of itself. The numbers in the Historical Archive were going down. Slowly, but measurably. Every few seconds, a name would vanish. Not be replaced with dough. Vanish. The row would collapse upward. The total would tick down by 1. Marcus had a script running that was screenshotting the totals every second. He showed us the diff. At 4:32 a.m., the archive contained 168,431,902 records. At 4:40 a.m., it contained 168,431,488. It had lost over 400 people in 8 minutes. We watched it tick down in real time. Karen reached out and touched the screen like she could stop it with her finger. She said, "Which ones is it taking?" Marcus said, "I can't tell. It's not chronological. It's not alphabetical. It's not by region. I can't see a pattern." I said, "It's taking the ones nobody remembers." Everyone looked at me. I said it again. I said, "Think about it. Think about who you can still picture. Think about who you can't. It's taking the ones who have already faded from the people who loved them. It's taking the unremembered first. And once it's done with them..." I did not finish the sentence. Karen finished it for me. She said, "It comes for the remembered." Marcus sat down. He put his hands on the desk on either side of his keyboard. He did not type anything. He said very quietly, "My grandmother is in that archive." He started to cry. I went back to my desk. At 5:02 a.m. Eastern, the first international confirmation came in. The United Kingdom's Office for National Statistics reported that their death registration system had ceased recording new entries at 500 hours Greenwich Mean Time, which was midnight Eastern, the exact same second. Within 20 minutes, France, Germany, Japan, Brazil, India, Australia, South Africa, Mexico, Canada, and Egypt had all confirmed identical disruptions. The pattern was consistent. Death certificates were submitted. The system accepted them. The names did not stick. The dashboards read 0. The historical archives were beginning to shrink. This was not an American event. It had never been an American event. We had simply been the first to look at our screens and notice. Karen pulled up the global feed. Every country with a digitized mortality registry was now reporting in. Every single one was reading 0 new deaths since midnight Eastern. It was, I realized, exactly 5 hours since the world had stopped reporting deaths. And in those 5 hours, no one anywhere on the planet, in any language, in any system, had been able to make a name stay on a death certificate. I want you to understand the size of what I am saying. Roughly 160,000 people die in the world every day. In the past 5 hours, somewhere around 33,000 human beings have died. Not one of them has been recorded. Not one of their names exists in any database, in any morgue, in any hospital chart, in the memory of any official record keeper, anywhere on Earth. They are still being mourned. The families are still grieving. The bodies are still being washed and wrapped and carried. The rituals are happening. Human beings are doing what human beings have always done, but the systems we built to remember them, the systems that were supposed to be our backup, our long memory, our promise to the dead that they would not be forgotten, those systems have all, in 1 second, gone blind. And the older parts of those systems are now beginning to bleed. I sat at my desk and I thought, for the first time in my adult life, that I did not understand what country I lived in, because the answer, I realized, was that I lived on Earth. And Earth was the unit being affected. At 5:30 a.m., a video call came in from a number I did not recognize. Karen routed it to my station because she said the caller had asked for anyone who was writing this down. The caller was a woman in her 60s. She introduced herself as Dr. Imelda Vasquez, a professor of cognitive linguistics at Georgetown. She said she had been pulled into an emergency consult by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy about 90 minutes earlier. She said, "I have a theory. It is not a comforting theory, but I want it on record with someone outside the building because I'm not sure the building wants to hear it." I told her to go ahead. I told her I was recording. She said, "Names are not just labels. Names are anchors. Every time you say a name, every time you write it, every time you remember it, you are reinforcing a small piece of structure in the shared cognitive space of the people who knew that person. That structure is what we usually call memory of the dead. It is what allows a person to continue to exist, in some functional sense, after their body stops." She paused. Something has interrupted that anchoring process. Something has, as best I can describe it, severed the link between the act of remembering and the structure it usually creates. The names are still being said. The names are still being written. They are simply not landing anywhere. They are passing through us. I asked her what could cause that. She said, "I do not know. I have hypotheses. None of them are scientific. The most honest answer I can give you is that something has changed about the substrate the human species uses to remember its dead. And we did not change it. It changed on its own. Or it was changed by something we do not have a framework for." I asked her what we should do. She said, "Speak the names out loud, as often as you can, as clearly as you can, to other people, ideally. We do not know if it will work. We do not know if anything will work. But the act of speaking a name to another living person who hears it and confirms it has, throughout human history, been one of the most reliable methods we have for keeping someone alive after death. We should try." She hung up. I wrote down what she said, word for word. Then I said my mother's name out loud. I said, "Linda Reyes." Karen, at the desk next to mine, looked up. She said, "I heard you." We started the naming around 5:45 a.m. I do not know who started it. It may have been Karen. It may have been me. It may have been all of us at once. What I can tell you is that at 5:45, every person in the operations room stood up from their desk, walked to the center of the room, and began to say the names of their dead out loud to each other. Karen said her father's name. Edward Marchetti. Marcus said his grandmother's name. Helena Okafor. A junior analyst named Priya said the name of a friend she had lost in college, Daniel Cho. Another analyst said his brother's name. His brother had died at 19 in a car accident 16 years ago. I said my mother's name, Linda Reyes. I said my father's name, Roberto Reyes. I said my grandmother's name, my grandfather's name, the name of an uncle I had only met twice, the name of a college roommate who had overdosed in 2011, the name of a man named Hank who had stood in my mother's bedroom 3 hours earlier and tried and failed to remember her face. We said the names out loud. We said them to each other. We listened. We confirmed. We repeated. When we were done, we stood there in the center of the room, 11 of us, and nobody knew what to say next. Then Priya very quietly said, "I can still see my friend's face." And Marcus said, "I can still see my grandmother's." And Karen said, "I can see my father." And I said, "I can see my mother." For the first time in 6 hours, the room did not feel like it was holding its breath. At 5:58 a.m., the phone started ringing again. Not the same way. Not the press calls, not the panicked clerks. Something different. I picked up the first one. It was Patricia, from Lexington County, South Carolina. The clerk who had called at 12:51, the very first call of the night. She said, Daniel, I can read them." I asked her what she meant. She said, "The names on the certificates. I can read them. I just said them all out loud to my husband on the phone. He repeated them back. They stayed. Daniel, they stayed. I felt something move in my chest that I had not felt since midnight. It was not relief. It was too sharp to be relief. It was something closer to the feeling you get when a fever breaks and you realize how sick you have been. She said, Robert Ames, Marcia Pendleton, Tobias Wells, Aaron Krause, Linda Briggs, Henry Dougherty, Sarah Vassar, and the eighth, the undetermined, she was a Jane Doe to begin with. We never had her name, but I'll keep looking. I wrote down the names. I said, Patricia, listen. Tell them. Tell everyone in your office. Tell every clerk you know. Names spoken out loud to another living person who confirms them. That is the protocol. We think it is the protocol. We do not know, but we think. She said she would. She hung up. The next call was a coroner in Phoenix, the same one Karen had spoken to earlier. He said he could now identify the body on his table. He said her name was Rosalind Marquez. He said he had said her name to a nurse, and the nurse had said it back to him, and they had both written it down. The third call was from Mount Sinai. They had cleared 4 of their pending certificates. The 4th was from Mass General. 6. The 5th was Cleveland Clinic. The pages started coming in faster than I could read them again. But this time, the numbers were not climbing. They were resolving. They were closing. By 6:15 a.m., the dashboard had begun to climb. Slowly, by ones, by twos. At 6:22 a.m., it read 14. At 6:30 a.m., it read 47. I want to be careful here. I want to tell you the truth. The protocol did not work for everyone. There were people who could not be named because everyone who had known them was already gone. There were people whose names had been lost in the first hours of the night, before anyone had thought to write them down. And there was no one left who remembered to speak them. There were entries in the historical archive that had simply vanished and would not be coming back, because the people they belonged to had outlived everyone who could have called them by name. The archive did not refill. It stopped shrinking, but it did not refill. At 6:40 a.m., I called Hank. He picked up on the third ring. He sounded exhausted. I said, Hank, I need you to do something with me. I need you to say my mother's name, out loud, right now. He said, Daniel, I'm sorry. I have been trying for hours. I cannot get her name. I said, I'm going to say it first. I am going to say it, and you are going to repeat it. Okay? He said, okay. I said, Linda Reyes. He said, Linda Reyes. He started to cry. I said, say it again. He said, Linda Reyes. I said, Hank, look at her. Look at her face. There was a long silence. He said, Daniel, I can see her. I can see her face. Oh God, she's beautiful. I said, I know she is. I hung up. I put my head down on my desk. The sun came up at 6:48 a.m. I had not noticed the windows getting lighter. I had not noticed the rain stopping. I had not noticed anything outside the operations room since I had stood at the window at 4:20 and counted the lit windows of strangers. But at 6:48, Marcus said, Hey, look. We all looked. The light coming through the window was gray and weak and ordinary. A gray, weak, ordinary morning in Maryland in October. The parking lot was wet. The service road had a few more cars on it than before. Somewhere, a bird was doing the thing birds do. I stood up. My legs felt strange. I walked to the window. Across the way, in the residential neighborhood, most of the lights were still on. But a few had gone off. People were starting to sleep, or starting to get up, or starting to do whatever people do on the morning after they have been told to write down the names of the people they love. Karen came up beside me again. She was holding a cup of coffee in each hand. She gave me one. She said, "Daniel." I said, "Yes." She said, "I want to say something to you, and I want you to remember it." I said, "Okay." She said, "Edward Marchetti was my father. He was born in Newark in 1942. He worked for the Postal Service for 41 years. He had a mustache, and he wore a brown coat, and he made the best meatballs I've ever eaten in my life. His name was Edward Marchetti." I said, "Edward Marchetti." She said, "Thank you." We stood there for a while, drinking the coffee, watching the light. I left the office at 7:30 a.m. Karen told me to. She said I had done my shift and then some. She said the dashboard was climbing again, slowly, and the calls were resolving, slowly. And the historical archive had stabilized at 168,427,113 records, which was about 5,000 fewer than it had contained at midnight, and would never be more. She said, "Go see your mother, Daniel." I drove to Falls Church. The drive normally takes about an hour. It took me almost 2, not because of traffic, because I kept pulling over. I would be driving along, perfectly fine, and then I would have to pull onto the shoulder and sit with my hands on the wheel and breathe for a few minutes before I could keep going. The radio was on. Every station was doing the same thing. Anchors and DJs and call-in hosts were reading names. Lists of names. Names submitted by listeners. Names of the dead. Some of them were people who had died last night. Some of them were people who had died years ago, decades ago. Some of them were just names, untethered to dates, set into the air because someone, somewhere, was afraid of forgetting them. I drove with the radio on, and I listened to the names. A woman in Cleveland called in and said, "I want to say my son's name. His name was Marcus Williams. He died of leukemia when he was 9 years old. He was 9 years old." A man in Albuquerque called in and said, "Dolores Trujillo, my wife, 53 years, Dolores Trujillo." A teenager called in and said, "My grandfather. His name was Pop. I never knew his real name. He was Pop. Pop Henderson. I think his name was Pop Henderson." I listened. I drove. I pulled over twice more. At 9:18 a.m., I parked in front of my mother's building. I went upstairs. The door to her apartment was still open. Hank was sitting on the couch in the living room. The TV was still on the blue screen. He had Pepper, my mother's dog, on his lap. He was stroking her head very slowly, the way you do when you are not thinking about your hands. He stood up when he saw me. He hugged me. He smelled like the cologne he had worn for as long as I had known him, since I was 8 years old. He said, "She's in the bedroom, Daniel." I said I knew. He said, "I can see her. I can see her face. I have been sitting with her. I have been saying her name." I said, "Thank you." He said, "I'll go. I'll give you time." He left. He took Pepper with him. He said he would feed her and bring her back later. He said the dog had been good. He said the dog had not left the kitchen until he had said my mother's name out loud the 3rd time. And then she had come and sat by his feet. I went into the bedroom. My mother was in her bed. Her glasses were on the nightstand. Her hand was on top of the blanket. The light was on. I looked at her face. I could see her. I could see her completely. She looked like my mother. She looked like a woman who had lived for 73 years and had raised 2 children and had loved a man named Roberto Reyes for 41 of those years and had outlived him by 9. She looked like someone who had spent Tuesday evening telling her son, on the phone, about a recipe with chicken and lemons and an herb that I could not, in this moment, remember. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I took her hand. I said her name. I said, Linda Reyes. I said it again. I said, Linda Maria Reyes, Mom. I sat there for a long time. I told her about the night. I told her about the calls. I told her about Karen and Marcus and Patricia in Lexington County and the linguist and the president and Hank. I told her I loved her. I told her I would remember. It is now 11:11 a.m. I am back at my desk at the regional hub. I came back because I told Karen I would, and because I do not want to be alone in my apartment yet, and because there is still work to do. The dashboard reads 1,847 deaths recorded since midnight Eastern. The number is climbing, slowly, as families and clerks and coroners and nurses across the country continue the slow, terrible work of speaking names out loud to each other and confirming them and writing them down. That number will never be right. There are tens of thousands of deaths from last night that will not be on it. They happened. They are real. The people who died were real. But their names did not survive the hours when the world forgot how to remember its dead. And we will not be putting them back on the dashboard, because there is no one left to put them there. We are calling them the unnamed. We will mark October 14th every year as a day of speaking. The instruction, going forward, from every health agency in every country in the world is the same. Speak the names of your dead out loud, to another person, who hears you, who repeats them, who writes them down. That is the protocol now. That is the only protocol that worked. There is one thing I have not told you. When I sat on the edge of my mother's bed this morning, and I said her name, and I told her I would remember, she was not breathing. She had not been breathing for hours, but when I held her hand, and I said her name out loud, into the room where she had died alone, the room got warmer. Not by much. By a degree, maybe. Maybe less. Maybe I imagined it. But Pepper, when Hank brought her back, walked straight into the bedroom and lay down on the floor at the foot of the bed, in a patch of sun that was not there before. I do not know what that means. I do not know if the names we speak go anywhere. I do not know if anyone hears them on the other side. I'm going to keep speaking them anyway. My name is Daniel Reyes. I am still here.